No, thank you very much, Yancy, for that introduction. I was almost giving hope because I couldn't get the internet links, but otherwise I am here. So I have prepared a few remarks that I wanted to talk about. But before I talk about the remarks that I have gotten, I just wanted to talk about my journey into this space and how it can assist us to think about the creative economy, science, and the fourth industrial revolution. I think one aspect of my education that I value quite greatly is the issue of multidisciplinary educational experience. The multidisciplinary educational experience for me meant that even though I was trained as an engineer, I had to take human and social sciences. This is really what the American educational experience gave me. So when I was a student, I transferred from the University of Cape Town after 6 months. And I ended up in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. And according to the curriculum, I had to take 6 human or social science, 12 human and social sciences. So I took 2 psychology classes. I took 3 acting classes. I took 1 history class, no, 2 history classes. One was history of economics, and the other was history of Southern Africa. And I think this is really what the fourth industrial revolution is all about. Because the fourth industrial revolution is about the merging of the technology to humans to form a system. And all of us today are no longer just a human biological system, but we are also a machine, because many of us cannot live without our devices. Whether these devices are our phones, whether these devices are our artificial legs if we have lost limbs. So we live in an era where man and machine is becoming a single system, and a person will not be able to exist without a machine. But certain developments have happened over the last few years. Neuralink, a company that is formed by Elon Musk, is an example of that. But that has been happening even before then. Now, what people are trying to do is to get the a system where one can be able to download information directly from the brain. And I think this is actually quite important, because one of the most inaccessible aspects of us as human beings has actually been the brain. We don't understand it as much as we are supposed to understand it. And we are not able to manipulate it. Well, not manipulate, we are not able to certainly read people's minds, certainly technologically, as much as we can be able to read our hearts, our kidneys, and other vital aspects of our body. So this is really what the fourth industrial revolution is all about. And of course, we live in this era of the fourth industrial revolution amidst a pandemic. The COVID pandemic has actually disrupted our lives. And the fourth industrial revolution has been lingering in the background to help us navigate this pandemic. Firstly, as a mode of communication, many of us were not aware of the Zoom platform, for example, before the pandemic. So in a sense, the pandemic has actually thrusted us right at the center of the fourth industrial revolution. And if you look at some of the drug developments, technology, artificial intelligence was in the lab to be able to help design better vaccines. If you look at what was happening in China, they were using drones to be able to monitor people who were not complying with the COVID regulations. Much of the devices, the temperature devices that we are using, also fall within this area of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, what is this thing called the fourth industrial revolution? As the World Economic Forum puts it, and I quote, the fourth industrial revolution is about more than just technology-driven change. It is an opportunity to help everyone, including leaders, policymakers, and people from all income groups and nations, to harness converging technologies in order to create an inclusive, human-centered future. The real opportunity is to look beyond technology and find ways to give the greatest number of people the ability to positively impact their families, organizations, and communities, close quote. This has, of course, renewed the need for innovative thinking. This, after all, is how we adapt with agility to our current context, where business as usual simply no longer exists. What has been intriguing is how we are reimagining the very concept of innovation. We are reimagining in an era where things are moving fast. So the innovation that we're reimagining today has to take into context that products are going to come to the market and disappear very, very fast. It's called hypercapitalism. While I will delve into innovation over the course of this keynote, I must emphasize that innovative thinking, the ability to come up with new ideas and intriguing solutions to problems, is actually a skill. In fact, it is this very skill that in many ways differentiates us from machines, for the moment at least. The prolific American writer and professor Isaac Asimov interrogated the concept of coming up with new ideas in his 1959 essay on creativity. And I recommend that you go and read this article written by Asimov. As he explains in the article, and I quote, presumably the process of creativity, whatever it is essentially the same in all its branches and varieties, so that the evolution of a new art form, of a new gadget, a new scientific principle, all involve common factors. We are most interested in the creation of new scientific principle or new application of an old one, but we can be general here. One way of investigating the problem is to consider the great ideas of the past and see just how they were generated, close quote. The factors of innovation encompassed by new products, productive techniques or technologies are defined by economist Joseph Schumpeter in 1911, spent him to coin the term creative destruction, which dismantles long-standing practices of production. Innovation is in some ways transformational. We will always be confronted with the new. It is contending with the supply and demand that is the key to success of innovation. As Schumpeter explained, the concept, it is a process of industrial mutation that revolutionizes the economic structure from within, destroying the old one and creating a new one, close quote. We are seeing almost a resurgence of this theory now through disruption. In 1995, Clayton Christensen introduced the concept to denote innovation that displaces systems that are already established. Those of us with a historical bent, disruption has accompanied every evolution. You can have a toolkit, but the toolkit must keep pace with the technological tsunami we are facing every second. Our business models and practices have transformed overnight from digital authentication for banks, 3D printing in healthcare, and even the model of Uber. To get to the root of the definition of disruption, it describes a process whereby a smaller company with fewer resources is able to successfully challenge established incumbent businesses. We have seen through the establishment of various 4IR-centered companies, such as Uber and Tesla, which one cannot ever imagine a time when they were considered small businesses. As established businesses focus on improving their products and services for their most demanding customers, they exceed the needs of some segments and ignore the needs of others. Disruption begins by targeting the overlooked segments with functionality and lower prices. These entrants then move up market, delivering the same performance to the established businesses' mainstream customers. This is when disruption has really occurred. I have delved into this definition, not to give you a business lesson, but to indicate what we really mean when we talk of innovation. This is perhaps best summed up by the English poet, William Blake, who wrote in the Auguries of Innocence in 1803. What is now proved was once imagined. Innovations in products and services could increase our GDP by as much as 7%. And according to a report by McKinsey Institute on impact of AI on the world economy, to hone into our own context, it is apparent that innovation is believed likely to emerge elsewhere, with Africa and South Africa as receiving agents. In other words, we are often, realistically speaking, not innovating in the same way as the United States, China, and other countries. South Africa is not alone on the continent in this resolve to punch higher and harder. This has certainly not been Africa's projected trajectory. I'm reminded of Kwame Nkrumah, a visionary who had a dream of what we in Africa can become. And I will quote, "We shall accumulate machinery and establish steel works, iron foundries and factories. We shall link the various states of our continent with communications. We shall astound the world with our hydroelectric power. We shall drain marshes and swamps, clear infested areas, feed the undernourished, and rid of our people of parasites and disease. It is within the possibility of science and technology to make even the Sahara bloom into a vast field with verdant vegetation for agricultural and industrial development." Close. Have we achieved this? Is the Africa that Nkrumah was talking about the Africa we see today? In 2014, the African Union Heads of State and Government Summit adopted a 10-year science, technology, and innovation strategy for Africa. And of course, it is underpinned by science, technology, and innovation. Are we moving from strategies to implementations? Are any of these strategies taken seriously by our private sector? Do our lawmakers understand science, technology, and innovation? When we go to our parliamentary portfolio on science and innovation, do we get the sense that our parliamentarians are up to the standard that is required to change our continent? We are not alone. Many of us saw the interview of Mark Zuckerberg with the American Congress. Again, the indications was that Mark had an easy ride because the American congressmen and senators did not sufficiently understand science, technology, innovation, and so on and so forth. So, with all these strategies that we have adopted, and here in South Africa, we have the Fourth Industrial Revolution strategy. It looks good, and it talks about real things that must happen in our economy. Of the 8 recommendations that I'm going to talk about, invest in human capacity development. For how long have we been talking about investing in human capacity development? For how long have we been complaining about the failures of our schooling systems? I even remember the 10-point plan on how to get our education back to where it is supposed to be. For how long are we going to tolerate teachers who do not show up on Mondays because they have hangover? For how long are we going to allow our students, our learners to learn under trees with no basic infrastructure? So when the Fourth Industrial Revolution came and said, we need to invest in human capacity development, we realized that none of these strategies that we are talking about are going to work unless we have adequate human capacity that is equal to the task. And I've already talked about what I mean when I say equal to the task. They must understand both the human side of education of our society, the social side, and the technological side. So the education must prepare our people to understand that technology is not only interacting with other technologies, which is what happens, but also interacting with humans and societies, and that the people who create that technology must understand the span of that knowledge in its entirety. This means multidisciplinary educational experience, which I have talked about relating to my own educational system. In my psychology class that I took as an undergrad, we were taught about the concept of reinforcement learning. But now, in artificial intelligence, a hard science, much of the technology is driven by artificial intelligence. So the second recommendation that we made is to establish the National Artificial Intelligence Institute that focuses on the implementation of this important technology to all areas of our lives, whether it is in the economy, whether it is in the society, and so on and so forth. Artificial intelligence is the engine of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And simply put, artificial intelligence is a technology that allows machines to think and do the tasks that are done by human beings, usually better than human beings, with all sorts of implications on the future of work. Now, the question that we are forever asked is, if this technology is going to displace humans from their world of work, why do we even have to implement it? Yes, we have to implement it, because if we don't implement it, like what happened to our textile industry, production will simply move away from South Africa, leaving shades of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in its wake, and a poorer state, because production is not even happening in the country. So it is important that we advance our productive forces, and this technology is very important. That's why we made that recommendations. The third recommendation is about reindustrialization. We have deindustrialized simply because we have not invested into technology. If you go to a factory and you don't see robots, you don't see advanced ways of manufacturing, you can be sure that if that situation persists, that company will have closed down 4 years down the line. So the reason why we have deindustrialized is because we are no longer efficient. We are no longer, our productivity is no longer as high as it is supposed to be. So that is the third recommendation. The fourth recommendation is about data. Data is the new oil. Very, very important. And we have companies, data companies, such as Schumpeter, that are mining our oil, our new oil, which is data, on a daily basis. And we don't have mechanisms of even measuring how much they are mining from South Africa, let alone what they are doing with that data. So we need to look into the laws. And maybe let me talk about laws now. We need to look at the mechanisms of collecting data and the mechanisms of storing it. Do we build data centers? Do we build higher computing capabilities? One of my students, Dr. Rendani Mbuwa, was my PhD student who has just begun his academic career at Queen Mary, University of London, just yesterday. Did some work with in machine learning for his PhD. And at first, we used to go and rent computing power from Amazon. Every time he wanted to do huge computing powers, computing work, we will go and buy. It costs thousands for a few hours of renting the computing power. And later on, we realized that the CSIR's higher computing center is more than adequate. And he came to me and he said, look, I was very impressed with what we have. And he believes that we are not using it to the full. So this issue around data is about storage, it's about computing, and it is about security of data. And some of the data we will have to anonymize. If we are going to take the database that is collected from the Department of Health on medical images, so that our companies can be able to build a system that will be able to make a diagnosis, given the picture, given the images, and that system to be used for assisting a doctor in decision making. It will mean that we protect the peoples who contributed towards those X-rays, the patients themselves. So the issue of data security is very, very important. Then the fifth recommendation is about infrastructure. The infrastructure of communication is lagging behind. We are failing to adopt 5G simply because we have not awarded a spectrum in the last 15 years. And many of you will agree with me that our connectivity has deteriorated quite poorly. Let us go and award this spectrum so that we can be able to participate fully and connect our people. Let us go to our rural areas and make sure that there is connectivity. In my village, in Limpopo province, I struggle to connect and download things because it does not make commercial sense for companies to put lots of areas there. I even have a farm. One of the things that I've realized is that once you get out, especially into the farming areas, there is no connectivity. You have to now start thinking about satellite communication, which is obviously expensive. So infrastructure of the fourth industrial revolution is very important. Let us invest in it. Then the seventh recommendation is to look at all our laws. Look at all our laws and update them so that they talk to the issues of the fourth industrial revolution. An example is a company called Airbnb. It operates in South Africa. Because our laws are not updated to deal with issues of the fourth industrial revolution, they simply don't pay tax. We need to now reimagine the concept of even migration. In Finland now, they have a concept of a digital migrant, which is somebody who comes and work in a place, but they don't physically work there. And these are very important because the internet, the digital space is actually a space where we live in it. It might not necessarily be in the form of a land, but it is a space, of course it is in the form of frequencies, but it is a space and we must now start working in it as citizens, as countries, and so on and so forth. The last recommendation of the fourth industrial revolution is implementation. We speak a lot and implement less. It's very, very important that we begin to focus on implementation. And implementation requires capacity to implement. And capacity to implement must not be taken for granted. So that is what we recommended. Now, in conclusion, creativity is very, very important. It requires an open mind. It requires the education system that encourages inquiry. As Albert Einstein puts it, and I quote, "The measure of how clever you are is not by how many questions you can ask, it's not by how many questions you can answer, but by how many questions you can ask." Our classrooms must become much more lively. And I say this here at the University of Johannesburg, that yes, our classrooms must be much more lively. The idea that it's a one-way communication from the lecturer to the students it must come to an end. The second thing, and I've already talked about this issue of multidisciplinary education is very important. What we have done here at the University of Johannesburg, all our students now have to take an introductory literacy course on artificial intelligence. Very important. All our students here at the University of Johannesburg have to take another course called the Africa Insights module. Again, so that they are able to understand the environment that they live in. When they become entrepreneurs, they have to understand the environment in which they are operating on. And the third thing that we have done is the Africa by Bus project, where we take our students to the rest of the African continent. And we call it Africa Innovation by Bus, because when you go there, you're supposed to write an essay that focuses on the on the problems that you have encountered and on your ideas on how that problem can actually be solved. Very, very important. And we have successfully taken our students to Namibia, to Botswana, to Zimbabwe, to Mozambique and Zambia. And just before the pandemic, we were going to take them to Kampala via Kigali. And we were saying that flying there is not enough. You don't see the problems of migration because you don't cross the border by bus, by the border gates. You don't see those long lines and delays for hours, which impede trade between nations in Southern Africa. You don't see the diversity of our languages. How do we solve it using 4IR technology? Can we use natural language processing and technologies in order to deal with the fact that we have all these multiple languages? You don't see the rich fauna of our coast if you are just moving from hotel to the airport and so on and so forth. So it is very important that we enrich the experience of all of us, whether young or old, and I welcome all of you to register for the AI course at the University of Johannesburg. It is free. We even give you a certificate when you complete. So I thank you very much. Ngiyabonga. Bye, danke.
Professor Marwala, thank you for your fascinating talk. I will now open the floor for questions. Raise your virtual hand, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the question when I recognize you. No, Prof, it seems people are shy. You know what Prof said just now, I hope you listened, that classes must become more lively and it mustn't be a one-way communication. So please respond.
No, thanks. I see questions on the chat also, on the chat box.
Shall we give Dr. Bristow a chance first? I see her hand is up.
Hi. Thanks very much. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Marwala, and so good to hear you speak, and then also that so much of your thinking resonates with the work that we're trying to do in meeting the cultural and creative industries and 4IR. And I think we're being met by exactly the same hurdles that we're seeing across the board with this work, and that is legislation and also sort of adequate engagement with technological resources and infrastructure. I often feel that though we're kind of trying to be active with responding to the 4IR strategy and active in trying to engage policy development at different points, it's such an incredibly long process, and it stops many times. And I was wondering, one of the things that we're worried about is obviously just losing time, because these technologies and their acquisition and use by other countries is incredibly rapid. Do you have any sort of comment or advice in that regard?
No, absolutely. Well, I mean, I can attempt, because this is a difficult issue. How do we survive in this era where things are interconnected, where the previous revolution's way of working where a technology person knew very little about other spaces. Is no longer a competitive edge. Specialization is being challenged quite extensively in this fourth industrial revolution era. Cars are now speaking, which basically means that linguists must be in the design room, in much more ways than ever before. So I would say my advice is that we need to learn, and we need to learn quickly. This means we have to read more. And that's another idea that we introduced at the University of Johannesburg, that I do a monthly reading club. I'm gonna share it, Yancy. I'm gonna send you information on my next reading on the 12th, which is Beyond Bitcoin, where I will be reading for staff and students and all stakeholders who are interested. So we need to read more. We need to inform ourselves more, but we also need to be open-minded. I think this is very, very important. Open-mindedness is really a formula that we need in this era. And we need to think more. Because if I were to quote Asimov, it is only afterward that a new idea seems reasonable. So there is no stupid answer. There is no stupid idea. There's just an idea that does not work. And an idea that does not work does not necessarily mean that it is not a brilliant idea. It might just be that the market forces is not ready for it. So so we need to, and I go back to that idea that we really need to encourage discourse. One thing that I like about the informal American culture is that it opens up the innovation spaces, because now all of a sudden a young student can be able to question an old professor and tell the old professor that his ideas simply do not make any sense. And that is the root of creativity. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Jessica Glendingen. Sorry.
Hi.
Pronounce your surname.
Jessica Glendingen. I'm the Cultural Policy Officer from the Embassy of the Netherlands. And what I'm really sort of coming out from your talk, Professor, but also from Tegan's, is the necessity of a space for play and experimentation. And I think that is one of the things that we really lack here and within our education system, especially at an early age. We strip away the spaces for play, experimentation, failure, physical play with your hands, being able to take machinery apart. Tegan was mentioning how, it's relatively easy to put together a 3D printer, but without the experience of having built things previously as a child, I feel like there's a huge barrier there. Is there a possibility or a potential to bring those spaces into our formal education system, or is that something that is just not kind of feasible now? And do we really need to kind of look at external spaces, extracurricular spaces, to put these areas for play and experimentation into our young people's learning curriculum?
Well, I mean, I think I think we should bring them back. In my book, Closing the Gap, I talk about going to accompanying my grandmother to get clay, to make clay pots, And I talk about the engineering concepts that I learned from that. You know, material selection when we go and get the clay, about design when the clay is turned into a pot, you know, and then it is an engineering when it is put in the sun and it is put in the furnace, and high-level engineering when my grandmother will knock the pot and listen to the sound, you know. I found that very, very beneficial, and I think we should bring it back. I remember when we used to go and take grass to make mats, and these were not in things that we were doing when we were in 13 years old. This is like 7, 8, 9, and 10, you know, and you go and get grass and you put it in the sun, and you dry it, and then you boil it so that it can become soft and does not break, you know. So yes, we need to bring those play and experimentation back into our curriculum. And it does not even have to be sophisticated, because many people think we need sophisticated equipment. No, I mean, when we were doing this, it was in a village. There were lots of things that we could be able to do with what was around us. And then the other thing that we used to do, we used to make cars, wire cars. I don't know whether people still remember that, you know. And the lessons to design, certainly, that I derived from that is still very, very relevant today.
Thank you, Prof. Sean Earl Harris has a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. I hear you loud and clear, and it is good to be here in this space talking about the possibilities of the fourth industrial revolution. And a person who has been operating in this sphere since last year, it's 11 hours, can see many, many different dynamics of how really it can empower all our communities. I am here in the Free State near Kwakwa, and the signal is similar to the experiences of those in the rural, in the deep rural areas where it is non-existent from time to time. But I believe that the telecommunication companies will bring this signal up to par because of the South African Communication Department saying, I believe it was last week, that each citizen will get 10 gigabytes of free data now. Not well, I gather when the new spectrum will be open. I'm not sure how and which, if it is going to be from Telkom or if it's going to be a private entity, but each citizen will be receiving 10 gigs of free data. This will propel the technological innovation into the hands of those on the ground. And it's through possible, and I say that plans and motions that are in operation, to look at how the infrastructure can be put in place where those on the ground, the young especially, can access their 10 gigs and use it in a very, very positive way. But at the same time, the environment that I have operated in, it used to be the old gaming system. And I say old gaming system because the gaming system is still there, but it's moved over a little bit more because of the profitability of the cryptocurrencies and the NFTs and other arts within the gaming system platform. Now, there are even games where you play and you earn cryptocurrency in learning games, not just games of happiness, but learning games where children use them, if it is through mathematical or other challenges within the game. But once you go through, you earn cryptocurrencies. And in some countries, some of the younger youth are earning more in cryptocurrencies in the games than their family member. Now, there are platforms out there where we are learning, and I say that I've been told or informed that this is the new way, or the universities. You're speaking to experts right the way around the world, 24/7. Some of these platforms like Clubhouse or Discord, Twitter Spaces, many different virtual platforms are there, which are in like with Clubhouse, it's been going for 2.5 years, other platforms before that, etc. And there are many, and I say millions, of individuals up there 24/7 communicating about all their given subjects. You can pick a subject that you would like to discuss. You can open your room and you wait, or you advertise it and people will come and join you. Or you go and join some of those rooms with 1,000, 2,000, 40,000 individuals in when you are speaking. And if you are very knowledgeable on your subject and you have a great following, and like some of those in the metaverse have 500,000 followers, and when you can influence that many individuals and the new way of learning and the new way of education, it is a very, very, for me, opening way of how to educate a greater masses in a great way of going forward. Now, there are ideas of looking at ways now, as you were saying, to make, for us, we're saying that let's bring together those knowledgeable individuals within our communities here in South Africa first, and then continental, and then globally through the blockchain, to all work together to bring this to fruition now. It is there. We can already see that how it is working in other places, and it's only a way of coordinating how we bring it into all our peoples and all levels of life, because the fiat currency is deemed to be demised soon, and the new way, and that's the reason why, again, that they are channeling the communities towards the cryptocurrencies and the many different aspects of the new technology. We can participate in this right now, once it's education, learning, and learning every day of how best to do it. And in Africa, there are some outstanding minds. In South Africa, again, those within all the communities, once you give them the opportunity, there is no box, because as they were driving their little car or whatever they were thinking outside the box how to make it. And I've been in communities. I've been in South Africa for over 27 years, and I've seen the innovation of, we'll make a plan and it's up, it is done. And I thank you for your time. I don't mean to hog the class. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think you touched on many issues. In fact, yesterday I wrote an article on the Daily Maverick, where I was drawing lessons about innovation from Russia, nothing to do with Ukraine, that Russia has failed to innovate or to take their innovative and scientific culture into the commercial spaces. But if you look at Silicon Valley, Ethereum, what the second most popular after Bitcoin, was was created by a person who was born in Russia. One of the founders of Google was born in Russia. Many of the big names in machine learning and artificial intelligence were actually born in Russia. In fact, Russia is disproportionately represented in that creative space. The question is, what went wrong? And I draw 3 reasons why it went wrong. And I think you should go to the Daily Maverick and download that issue. And towards the end, I make a recommendation about the issue of free data to the minister that is going to be given to everybody. That if this data is going to be used to watch some TV show, then it is going to be a waste. If I was the minister, I was going to limit it to educational website and platforms, so that it can be used to advance itself. I'm not saying people should not entertain themselves, but I think we should actually educate ourselves. But thank you very much for giving me this time to address you. I'm going to send Yancy the information on my next book reading on Beyond Bitcoin, and we'll be talking about the future of money and what distributed finance is going to do, removing the middleman. Normally, it used to be men because it was a very sexist setup, removing that middleman and making transactions much more immediate without we were having to wait for settlement to happen. So thank you very much.